Hello, this is a presentation being made on the experiences of neurodiverse professionals working in humanitarian WASH. It's being presented on behalf of myself, Sarah House, and John and Hiba. These two names are pseudonyms for two real professionals who, together with myself, have worked in the global WASH sector for multiple decades. We also work between us in multiple humanitarian contexts around the world. Between us, we also have Asperger's, autism spectrum disorder, autistic traits, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and dyslexia. So, mental health conditions, disorders or illnesses, psychosocial disabilities and neurodiversity. These are basically all applicable to us. We think they're positive and we think that they're useful for different reasons. They're just looking through a different lens. So mental health conditions is looking through the health lens and the quality of life lens. Psychosocial disabilities is looking through the disability lens and thinking about the way that people interact with us and that we're disabled because of the way that they interact with us, and we want them to interact differently so that it takes away our disability. Neurodiversity just seems that we're all on a spectrum and it's just a nuance of the different way that our human brains function. So there is diversity related to mental health conditions. So there are different kinds. They can be lifelong, short-term, they can be from birth and genetic or develop later in life or influenced by the environment. They can be mild to severe, and you can have more than one at one time. Stigma is a major issue for people with mental health conditions. Stigma operates through ignorance, stereotypes, prejudice, discrimination. Examples of stereotypes might be that people with mental health conditions, that we're unpredictable, we're untrustworthy, maybe even dangerous, that we're just lacking willpower, we're responsible for our own condition, or it might be even a belief that it's due to witchcraft. You know, it is historical, it's everywhere, and it's very current, and it can cause guilt, shame, embarrassment and fear, and hence a reluctance to disclose information. So we really need to increase social contact and engage with people who have a mental health condition to help to challenge this stigma. So here are a number of different conditions that are on the neurodiversity spectrum, and we tend to process information, experience the world in a particular way that's sometimes perceived as different. So we're considered as being not neurotypical. So here we're going to look at the strengths and challenges at work related to people with three different conditions which are quite more common in our sector. So first I'm going to start with Asperger's and autism spectrum disorders, and this is a condition that I have. Professions with more people with this condition are people in medicine, including neurology, engineering, which is my profession, physics, accountancy and IT. And if you think about it, these are all professions which need skills focusing on the details. And we're basically investigating what's going on to try and understand it. Well-known people who have Asperger's, so Greta Thunberg, the climate change campaigner, Elon Musk, the world's richest man, and Temple Grandin's a fantastic autism advocate. Also, it's assumed that people such as Marie Curie and Sir Isaac Newton also would have had Asperger's. We're all people who think outside the box, who don't listen to people who say it isn't possible, and who influence change. So people with Asperger's, so strengths, average to very high intelligence, high integrity, honest, straight speaking, strong sense of social justice, very inclusive people, very detail orientated and think in visual images, but also have a range of difficulties, particularly in communication with others, because we're often misunderstood, because we don't really follow and understand the rules of communication, and it's really exhausting to continue doing this all the time. We don't understand why people don't speak honestly and tell the truth, and we may have difficulties with a range of different kinds of sensations. You know, sometimes people say you feel that we're insensitive and we're too direct, but actually we're more sensitive than many people. You know, adults are 6 times as likely to attempt suicide, and females are 3 times as likely than other females to succeed in committing suicide. And so, you know, in terms of being more direct, so this quote is from Australia, of colleagues of people with autism. It says they've actually helped sharpen up some of the thought processes amongst the teams. They ask questions where others fear to tread, and I know that people tell me that, you know, I do that quite often, and some people absolutely hate it, so they don't like working with me, and other people really love it and they come up and thank me. So it's a really interesting different kinds of reactions you get. So then thinking about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. So the example strengths are ability to hyperfocus for long periods on things they're interested in, flexibility and spontaneity, which can be really useful in a humanitarian crisis, very creative, innovative and willing to take risks. But the challenges that they face may be poor working memory, lots of extra effort to manage time, easily distracted and needs stimulation, and also that interpersonal skills can sometimes be misread as careless or rude. And in addition, their traits may be perceived as lacking intelligence. And dyslexia. So this is a learning difficulty about information processing. It is another condition that I have, and also quite a few engineers also have. It gives us strengths. You know, we think through pictures. We have strong visual processing and pattern recognition. We're more holistic in terms of what we see. We have creative and entrepreneurial skills. But we also face a range of challenges, and this might relate to reading or writing. To me, it's I struggle with dates, names, and numbers, and I can't read big blocks of main text, and I have problems with oral cognition, so I have to write things down. It's also more time consuming, and I have to be organised to function. We would now like to highlight 3 worrying trends that we have noticed in the practices in humanitarian WASH. The first is that communication priorities seem to be unintentionally increasing the exclusion of some professionals. So the unintended effects of the word police. You can't use that word, or you can't use that one. The best practice has changed. Oh no, that word excludes X group. This does not respond to the underlying problem, and it's leading to bringing discussions to a halt. If people feel criticised, barriers come up, people withdraw, and we become less willing to engage in issues around inclusion and stigma change, and it undermines and alienates potential allies, and hence, rather than contributing to inclusion, it contributes to exclusion. And this is the politeness dance, which is a term that I use about the constantly changing rules of communication. So if you think when we travel to different countries, we always try and be careful to learn what are the ways we can speak, what ways we can't speak, because we don't want to cause offence. And this also happens in the communication in our own societies, but we're often not aware of it as much. But what we've noticed over the years is that there's been increasing sensitivity around what you can and can't say. And what's happening now is that we're actually not being able to talk about problems, gaps, failures. It's becoming less acceptable. We're having to overemphasize the good things and underemphasize the bad things. So there's less honesty in communication. It's leading to less opportunity to improve, more difficult also for neurodiverse professionals to engage. And again, engineers and other technical staff are often seen as insensitive, but as a profession, we're more neurodiverse traits than the general population. We're practically minded people, and we find it difficult to follow these sort of theoretical changing rules of communication. And it leads to us being demotivated and losing skills and committed people from the sector. So another issue and worrying trend is about the image of accountability, which seems to be more important these days to a sector than real accountability. So the question to all of us is, how self-aware are we of our own sector's levels of blah, 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 i.e. where our words and actions do not align? So some examples, how often do we in our organisations, not release evaluation reports because we think they're too negative? How often do we not tell the truth to the donors about our challenges and failures? How often do we waste huge sums of money due to dysfunction, but then we'll pretend we have not? Or how often do we promote ourselves as being strong in equity and inclusion, but we ignore people who are most vulnerable, and even worse, we're not honest about these gaps? Or we say we're inclusive, but we don't have nobody with a disability working in our staff team. So the third worrying trend is about the reducing value put on learning and evidence from experience and observations on the ground, and putting too much value on academic learning and evidence. As neurodiverse professionals, we're learning from real life, we're focusing on the details, we're constantly triangulating across contexts, and we often have more foresight than other people. And we're not just doing one-off studies in one place at one time. So this imbalance just doesn't seem to be logical to us, and we think it's a dangerous direction to be going in. And we encourage you to read this book, Can We Learn Better by Robert Chambers, if you'd like to learn more about this issue. So a little bit of personal learning. As you know, I've been working in the sector for 3 decades, and it's only in the last year that I've really started talking about my Asperger's. And some people have been really interested, encouraging, kind and supportive, and some have just reacted with total silence and no reaction, just sort of totally blanking the fact that I've said it. And it's really fascinating as to why there's such a difference in terms of reaction. And there's people, a few people who work on equity and inclusion who are in the very interested and supportive group, but there are many people working on equity and inclusion who just have totally ignored the fact that I've said it. And I'm really curious about this because it's like, and there's people who have known me for decades are also in both groups. And, is the silence about stigma? Is it about being frightened to offend? Is it about lack of interest? Is it, I don't know what really, but I'm really curious to find out. And I just say feel free to get in touch if you think you're on the spectrum yourself, or you'd like to better support and benefit from the skills of colleagues. I'd love to hear from you. So, recommendations going forward. We need to respect differences, value people and make use of their skills all along the neurodiversity spectrum. Be open and honest in our conversations, including about the challenges and failures. Stop being the word police. Learn to agree to disagree. And encourage people to engage, not disengage. And don't exclude colleagues because they can't follow the latest rules of communication. They may actually be more inclusive than you. Increase our value of the learning which is practical and based on observation and working together with communities, and finally have more integrity in our accountability in humanitarian WASH. So here are a range of links if you're interested in more information. So we'd like to say a sincere thank you to everyone who supports us and makes us feel valued and welcome, and to all of the champions breaking silence and increasing awareness on these issues around the world. And we'd like to sign off with this inspiring quote by Alan Turing, who was the designer of the Enigma machine, which cracked the German codes in the Second World War, and which was the early start of the modern computer. Sometimes it is the people no one can imagine anything of who do the things no one can imagine. Thank you for listening.